I'd like to give you just a little bit of insight on how to enter data into Excel. As you can see, what I already have typed in here is data pertaining to my different stock tickers and my different revenue stock tickers. So for my raw materials, you might remember these as the ingredients that you need to build your product, and then the revenue corresponds to the actual competition out there in the market. Okay, so basically to sort of replicate what I have here, you can kind of see how it's set up in a table mode. Now, because we want to actually have the date, but in addition to that, we also want to have some numbers corresponding to those dates. So you can see here all I typed is, if you just come into a cell, so let's try to recreate this. If I typed in 9/13, then it would know that I'm talking about September 13th of this current year. Now the cool thing I can do is I can come in here and type in September 14th, or excuse me, type it in by hand, and it'll still know what I'm doing. So I do 9/14, that works, or I can actually type in September 14. So Excel is pretty smart. Now one thing that you can always do, a great thing about Excel, is that if I type in equals into an empty cell and I turn my cursor over to the next one, notice how it highlights that cell and it says, oh, right now you're in E14. Well, what this means is that I can actually do or take some function of that cell. Like if I want to add 1 to it, I just do equals E14 plus 1, and notice that it knows that I wanted to increment my day by 1. Okay, so now what I can do is I can actually hit Control C for copy, or right click and copy, and I can come over here and just paste as I go, and it increments automatically. So it uses my formula in here, but you can see that now as I copy it and paste it over, it actually references, it understands that it's just referencing the cell directly to the left of it and adding 1 to it. Now of course you can see here, because your stock tickers are going to go from the 13th all the way out to the 24th, you want to make sure that you give this gap of the weekend, because the 18th and the 19th the stock market was closed. So to do that, notice that I'm still taking, as you can see, my current formula, cell G2, and I'm adding 1 to it, but then over here you can see that I'm taking this cell and adding 3 to it because I want to skip the days on the weekend. And then I'm back over here to doing 1 day at a time. Now if you don't want to use the formulas to basically adjust the days for you, you can do it by hand. Now here, also right below this is going to be mainly for my model. My model, I want it to basically do days since September 13th. Now you'll notice it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but then there's this lapse of 3 days, and yet I'm calling this day 4 and day 5. You'll notice in the description of project part 2 that days only correspond to business days since September 13th. So this is actually the 5th business day after September 13th. So in here all I have is these cells for C4, C5, and C6. Those are just my stock tickers. And then in here I've actually come in and entered those numbers that I would get from the website. So you have to enter these by hand for all 10 business days. So you basically get to enter 10 times 6, which is 60 data points. Now if I enter a data point anywhere, like I typed in $11.43, it's going to show up as 11.43. In the introduction video, remember I mentioned that you can just hit the dollar sign and that will convert it to a dollar. So one of the things the project calls for is for you to take an average. So you've probably already noticed that if I use an equal sign, I can do a lot of things. Excel understands that I'm trying to use a formula. So if I type equals and then the word average and then a parenthesis, that's going to actually say, tell me what I can do with this. So if I actually clicked on the button average, it would give me details or examples on how to use average. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can kind of read about what it does. And then down at the bottom, they talk about certain specific examples of working with data. I'm just going to show you. I want to take the average of these 3 cells here. That will represent my average cost for September 13th. And as you can read in the project, this is not going to be totally realistic, but it'll do. So what I can actually do is come over here starting at either D4 or D6 and just click one of the cells, hold the left mouse click, and then scroll it down so that I highlight all of these. So you'll notice now what appears is take the average of cell D4, the colon means up to D6. Now I've got to close my parenthesis just like we do in math, and if I hit enter, Well, now it's computed the average for me. So if I go into a calculator and I take this plus this and divide it by 3, I'll get this number. Now, of course, I don't want to have to type equals average every single time and then have to pick 3 new cells. I can do that. And you'll notice sometimes even when you don't close your parenthesis, it'll still close it for you. But just get in the habit of doing it. So because I want the formula to always be the same, I want to take the average of the 3 cells above it. All I have to do is click copy. I can come over here, paste. Now notice it's taking the average of cells F4 to F6. So I'm going to copy this, and to make this even more quick, I'm going to highlight all the cells that I want to paste into, right click, paste, and it pastes that formula all the way across, makes it super quick to work with. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to copy this formula, I'm going to highlight all of these guys to do my revenue stock tickers, and I'm going to click paste. So that's all there is to finding an average. Hopefully this has been a helpful introduction to using this idea of formula. So remember, if you wanted to use a formula, you've got to have an equal sign in front of the operation you're going to use.